Hello and welcome. It's Saturday the 4th of January 2020 and here's the latest 420 news from the Canna community. The story so far, although first, a poem. Is it any wonder that people get so lyrical when they speak out loud of this medical miracle, recreational, industrial, or even sacramental? To make that all illegal is nothing short of mental. Governments come and governments go, but this is a fact everyone should know. While most cannabis remains a Schedule 1, that they leave it that way is not just dumb, but something maybe a little more sinister. Just look at the husband of our former drugs minister, maintaining a law that's criminally insane at the same time as making personal gain. It's time that this ended and they freed the weed and left me alone to grow my own seed. So this is the UK and world, well, vaguely, cannabis news. The good, the bad, and the very ugly. But first, a word from our sponsors. Hang on. What's that? We don't have any sponsors? And who's going to pay for all this equipment I've hired to air this newscast? Oh, of course, nobody as always. Anyway, back to reality and ignore that bit of sponsorship fantasy. First up, a reminder to anybody intending to go along in support of Mark and Leslie Gibson in court that it's on Monday the 6th at Carlisle County Court at 3 p.m. These guys are two proper stalwarts in the campaign and 2/3 of THC for MS, who used to send chocolate bars to people suffering from MS and were busted way back over 10 years ago. Well, they're back in court again on Monday. Leslie suffers from multiple sclerosis and uses cannabis to alleviate the symptoms of this debilitating disorder. Gary Olds, sadly, is also facing more charges. Gary has been a steadfast campaigner for cannabis cafes and things like that for many years and fights despite being imprisoned, and we would like to thank Gary for all his courage over the years. Then we move on to the legal changes. As you probably all know, on the 1st of November 2018, cannabis derivatives became prescribed for hardly anyone, unless you can afford a private prescription. Many of us have helped over the years with the organisation known as United Patients Alliance, who are at the moment pushing Carly's amnesty for the right to grow your own. As Carly was as peeved off as the rest of us with the extreme prices, and more so with our government's procrastination in looking at the cannabinoid THC. In this campaign, our general view is THC is quite safe as you become tolerant to cannabis and its cannabinoids. The WTU has been pushing on the human rights issue with their challenge to the Misuse of Drugs Act, contravening our human rights on several issues. More on this in our next update. The UK CSE President, Greg, hasn't been at all well and is also facing charges on top of this. Thanks to our government for showing such compassion to people suffering without cannabis. We wish Greg good health and a big thank you for all his work so far. These are some of the reasons why growing our own is fundamental to this campaign. Across the country, many clubs are being run on various levels, depending on the type of policing in the area. So, as Dylan once said, the times they are a-changing. With Teesside leading the way, Michael Fisher set up Club Exhale around 5 years ago, initially meeting with like-minded smokers and local parks. Now, Mr. Fisher has his sights Site set, sorry, I had to have a boot there. Site set, or kick, punch, or whatever it was, slap, on opening a club in County Durham this year. Keep up the good work, people. Another success has been Bristol Cannabis Club, who celebrated their 5th birthday last year, and recently the 1st anniversary of their clubhouse. Big up, guys. With others forming and planning to open as we speak, so please, if you feel inclined to start a club, the general consensus seems to be just go ahead and do it. Another real cannabis hero who has taken the campaign by storm the last few years, helping anyone she can, Callie Blackwell, along with JJ, who we all know and love, who is full of energy, pushing for the final changes. These outdated cannabis laws, whose roots lay deeply in racism and corporate greed, stop people from growing their own herbs for any use, which is a right of anyone who wishes to become a home herbalist. Frankly, it makes no sensey. Nobody needs a license to grow very dangerous plants, i.e. the highly toxic flowers called daffodils or laburnums, which may not be deadly but make you pretty poorly if you eat them or any part of them. So, only history can explain why a relatively safe plant like cannabis should be so restricted and has been illegal to grow in most parts of the world since a propaganda campaign financed by investors in the fossil fuel industries in the United States, which culminated in the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, when common sense went out the window. With, among other well-known propaganda campaigns, the Reefer Madness films, it became known as a dangerous drug, which we all know isn't true. Although these days it has been updated to skunk madness. So, getting legal medication has become a point of contention, and currently we have patients facing legal penalties for growing a plant that is beneficial for them. In many ways, not only for use as a recreational stimulant, but also for nutritional and medicinal uses. In these days of climate crisis, we citizens of the earth should be urging our governments to limit the use of outdated and dirty industries and concentrating on ways to prevent further damage to our delicate ecosystem by looking towards more sustainable methods of industries like agriculture, building, transport and so on, and using cannabis. Hemp as they like to call it, but it's all the same plant. With so many uses for this plant, it's always amazed me how they managed to demonise it in the first place. When they heard of a plant that grew like a weed with the most nutritious edible seed, its medicinal properties second to none, with thousands of uses, and then still some, if they used it for bricks as carbon sink, that could clean up the air, but they still didn't think. Could be spun into fabric for clothes and more. Well, that's how it used to be before. They've made it illegal to own or consume, and don't plant that seed, it's illegal to bloom. So now they just follow an ancient lie. It's a dangerous drug, so they'll just pass it by. Medicinal value, it has none, so they're going to leave it in Schedule 1. A lie it was then, not an inkling of truth that they hold on to now, despite all the proof. The world is much wiser than it was way back when, and soon we'll have medicine growing again, out in the open, where it ought to be, not hidden in closets, but proud and free. And when that day comes, I'll stand up and smile. We'll have won the fight, but it's been quite a while. It's time to put the demon of prohibition firmly back in its box. The history books is where it should be, and look towards a more humane planet for all living creatures. In further editions, we hope to feature interviews with prominent campaigners, but for now, you only get me. Coming up this year, there is Borafest in July. Special effect there, did you like it? Special effect of a hand. Ticket lines are open now. Then later on that month will be Green Pride in Preston Park, Brighton, as always. And finally, I'd just like to mention Crash, this book. Published by Alan Buffrey, a well-known campaigner for many, many years, featuring poems and stuff by some of the members of what is often called the Cannafam or Cannamunity. Inside My Hat and Other Heads is available on Amazon, who should pay their bloody taxes, to be honest, for £10 and 1 penny. The price is set, as books over a tenner are postage free. Oh, and just one last word. Namaste.